Good Lord. What is up, YouTube? Hey, it's your boy Mike D, and doing a little different format today on my video. As you can see, Sundays I give my makeup artist the day off, so I don't want to show you guys my face without me being all done up and whatnot. And also, evidently today, there's some televised sporting event where some rather fit gentlemen, are going to separate into two groups, and then they're going to take turns trying to move a ball across a field while the other group tries to stop them. Evidently it's a big deal. People have parties and whatnot to observe this display of athletic prowess. So before you attend such a party and you get a little bit too maybe inebriated to enjoy the content today, I just want to run through. So I got some feedback from my friends and family that basically said, hey, and contrary to popular belief, or what you may believe, I do in fact have friends and family. I'm not making this up. Anyway, so on that note, they said basically they didn't really understand anything I said because they're not tech people. They don't follow tech YouTube channels. So I just wanted to take this time to talk about motherboards in particular. This is the way I explain what a motherboard does to my children. I've built PCs with both of my kids from scratch, and I always try to tell them what each component does. And this is the metaphor that I use to talk about motherboards, right? So I tell them to just imagine that the motherboard is like a city or a country. Basically, it has a territory, it has borders, and then it has infrastructure. There's structures and there's streets. There's ways for electrons. If you imagine the electrons are the citizens of this country, there's streets for those electrons to move back and forth to different structures in the country. And then there's a foundational document. Countries have constitutions, towns have town charters. Well, the motherboard has its rules, right? And they are inscribed in what they call the BIOS, or on newer motherboards it's called a UEFI BIOS. And that's saved and housed usually in a chip on the board. I'm pretty sure it's this one right here on this motherboard. This is an older, dead Intel board, so don't worry if I'm like touching the socket. Ooh, it's dead. Anyway, so yeah, the Constitution or the town charter's in here. And then you have underneath this gold heatsink right here, you have a chip. We call it the chipset. And it's responsible for basically enforcing the rules on everybody else, making sure that all the transactions that happen inside the motherboard are in adherence to the BIOS, right? And it also is carrying out the will of the seat of government, which is the CPU, right? The seat of government is like your town council and mayor combined into one, kind of. Or you can think of it as like it's the congressional and legislative body of a country or whatnot. And it seats into a socket. Now there are all different kinds of sockets. This is an LGA 1155, I think, socket, and they come with all different kinds of retention schemes, right? So this one has pretty standard. This is Intel's most common retention scheme to keep the CPU in the socket, right? So I said, it's like the seat of government. And just like governments, it can have a lot of different forms. If you learned in civics class, you can have a unicameral and a bicameral legislature. That's like one house or two houses, right? So you can think of a one physical core, one thread CPU as having one government with one house, right? And if you could think of a two-core CPU with two physical cores and two threads, that would be like, and I know some of you probably think this is a terrible idea, that'd be like cloning your current unicameral government, just making a perfect one-to-one clone. 99.99999% of the problems that are presented to that cloned house would match the outcomes of the original, right? They would come to the same conclusion every time. So if you cloned a bicameral government, you would have two physical cores with two threads in each. We call that multi-threaded or hyper-threaded or SMT. It depends on the company that makes the technology, right? But you have two physical governments. One of them's cloned from the other one. They're perfect clones of each other, right? And inside the physical governments, there are two houses, and they can carry on simultaneous activities with each at the all at the same time. And you can just extrapolate that out to 4 cores, 8 cores, and typically I don't know that I've seen computers with more than 2 threads per physical core. Comment in the description below. Comment below if you know of a CPU that has more than 2 threads per core, right? Okay, moving on. This house of government, it's got cores, it's got threads, it's doing computations, right? It also occasionally, depending on the model of the CPU you have, will have a graphics package, an integrated graphics processing unit, iGPU, where you don't need an extra video card, or so back in the old days the video capability was integrated into this chipset I talked about earlier over here. Now they typically integrate them into the CPU. Intel puts that on just about all of the CPUs they make, their mainstream CPUs. That's like their one of their key features. AMD, when they put a graphics package in, they call it an APU. So yeah, it's just a different term for the exact same thing. Anyway, so moving on. So just like a country, a motherboard has points of entry and exit, right? So there are tons of ports, as you can see, all along the back side. We call this the back I/O panel, back input output panel. And then you have internal input output panel down here. And this is where you have connectors for extra USB ports. You can plug a specifically made cord. Matter of fact, if you have USB ports on the front of your PC tower or mini tower, there's a cord that runs from those ports all the way down to one of these ports right here. So specific ports for specific things. These are called SATA, and that's typically what you hook a hard drive up to, right? You just hook a hard drive up to one of these SATA ports, and then that's an input-output for data, right? Typically, data flows back and forth. Program data, your pictures, your music, your movies, whatever you got saved on your hard drive, it flows through this cable, through these ports, right? And then you have PCIe ports, and these are like multi-purpose, multi-function ports, right? One of the most common uses is you put an extra graphics card. If this graphics processor either A, isn't present, or B, very weak, and you want to play games, you'll pop in a discrete graphics card so that you can have better graphics performance. This is just a super small little thing. Don't pay attention to what it is. It's just easy to manhandle it on the video. Pop it into these PCI ports. But they're also useful for, so these don't always come with Wi-Fi integrated into the, usually it's back here on the rear I/O panel, so you have to add it, right? The way you can add it is you can use a PCI Wi-Fi adapter like this. It'll slot right in to here. It'll, and these antenna will stick out the back of your CPU tower. Pretty easy there. So I think that all makes sense. So you got the physicality, the physical borders of the country. You've got how you get data in and out of the country. Let's talk about power. So underneath these golden heat sinks right here, this is like, Edison light and electric for our country, right? Power comes in through this port here and this port here. This is specifically power for the CPU, and this is power for all the 3 and 5 and occasionally 12-volt uses all back here. And this is what's called a VRM, voltage regulation modules. And it manages and it feeds the power on demand to the CPU, and one of them over here will feed the power on demand over here to the RAM, and that's going to be the last thing I talk about. So RAM is random access memory, right? So this is like a special scribe service for the legislative body that's happening inside the CPU, right? When the legislature is in session and they have a ton of things to get through, they you know, the individual threads in there, maybe they can't remember everything that they're supposed to do, that they're trying to carry on. They got multiple processes happening at once, and they need the scribes to, you know, maybe occasionally refresh their memory. Hey, read that back to me. I don't remember what place I'm at, right? So this is the inscription service and their scribe service, and there's a special little office you can think of, a special controller in here that manages the writing of the notes onto the memory stick here. This is, if I had this heat sink off of here, you could see there's little memory modules running down this PCB in here. This is just a metal heat sink on top of these that doesn't really do anything. Anyway, so how fast the Congress can access their notes, if you want to think about that way, depends on A, the speed of the memory module itself, and B, the speed of the controller, or what speed the controller will support, right? So, and that brings me to like the final thing, right? So everything is happening on this motherboard simultaneously, right? You've got graphics processing going on, you've got central processing going on, you've got data flowing back and forth out of the hard drive, flowing back and forth through the import-output panel, and notes constantly being rewritten and sent back to the house, the CPU for processing. So that all has to be coordinated, right? They all have to be on the same page, and those actions and those computations and that data has to flow to the right place at the right time. And that is managed by the BIOS, or the execution of the BIOS by this chipset through what we call a base clock, right? Base clock means that everything, it's like the atomic watch for all of these components to be on schedule, on time. You can speed that up. Back in the old day, that's how you overclock. You can speed the base clock up, or you can manipulate a multiplier so that this guy thinks for every second that goes by on the base clock, actually 1.1 seconds went by. So he's working super fast, right? You speed him up by like a tenth of a percent. And that's pretty much it. So comment if you have any questions, if you want me to explain something different. Maybe I'll try to do, like every Sunday, try to do like a tech explainer video where I come up with some dumb metaphor and then try to explain it to you guys. Alright, so I've been Mike D. You haven't seen my face. The makeup artist is off. So this is a different format. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm out.